Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Uncle Greg Show podcast. And welcome to another episode, and happy February to you, and happy Black History Month. I hope all is going well with you, and I hope you have a pleasant and educational month. And I'm saying educational because I plan to expand my knowledge of Black history. Shoot, I just learned something a few minutes ago that I did not know previously about Black history. Well, I learned a number of things. I'm going to try to cover some of them. When I give you an example right here off of the bat, real quick, is the fact that I want to salute someone without whom you wouldn't be hearing me or anybody else, for the most part, or anyone who uses a microphone, because this man was behind the invention of the microphone, and he actually received a patent for it in 1962, electronic transducer, which makes all current microphones possible. His name is James Edward West, a black man. He's 91 years old, same age as my father, as a matter of fact. And he is the inventor, creator of I'm not going to say modern day microphone, because he had been working on this since the 40s and the 50s. So I'll just call him the father of the microphone. So God bless you for making this possible for me to be heard over the airwaves and everyone else who's ever recorded. Now, I want you to think about this. A lot of people like me, I didn't know this, but I could tell you who created Beats headphones, which are just something, when you look at overall Black history, are relatively insignificant. They come and they go. But this is something that has endured for 60 years? You think those Beats headphones are going to be around 60 years? Okay, and I'm going to leave that alone. But yet we celebrate it. Okay, but moving on. Before I go any further, I'm going to give a shout out to prayers and best wishes to my boy John. I'm not going to talk about why, but he knows why, and that's why I just want to let him know I'm always thinking about him, and he's in my prayers. And hey, put him in your prayers too. Just pray for him. Okay, moving on. As I said, this is Black History Month, and it's a bad way to start it off with what happened and, being overshadowed by what's going on in Memphis. And, you saw the title of this podcast. Here he goes on a rant again. Something doesn't make sense. Sounds crazy. Well, I'm going to break it all down to you and explain to you how I came up with that title. And I told you, I warned you earlier, try to keep things on a positive note. But when you piss me off, I'm going to say something about it. I am not going to sugarcoat or avoid controversial topics and subjects. And this week I listened to two people speak on this matter. One was a man of God, Reverend Terry Anderson, Pastor Dr. Terry Anderson, Lily Grove Baptist Church down in Houston, and D.L. Hughley. They both spoke very articulately on what's going on in Memphis with these cops and how it impacts all of us and how we all played a role in it one way or another. And that's how I came up with the title. And as the title said, we're all to blame for the death of Tyre Nichols. And not directly, but indirectly. You want to know how or why I believe so? It's because we allowed our culture to deteriorate to the point that it vomited out cops like this. And even though these cops that are in jail is constantly expanding, and I'm glad that it is, because when I saw the video, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. It's more than 5 cops. There's a bunch of cops, including a white sergeant who I haven't heard anything about yet. They were all present in and out. But as I said, we're to blame because we allowed our culture to deteriorate. We have allowed the culture to go down through our complacency and tolerance of things we knew were unhealthy and destructive. And we continue to do so. We have allowed our music to poison generations of children and ask why our boys are so violent and so weak, and our girls do so many immoral things and have such low self-esteem. We remain silent. And what you saw at that murder is a direct outgrowth or a direct result of what we've allowed our culture to become. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on the culture because I'm going to come back on another episode and I'm going to speak directly to the culture, the cultural deterioration of the black race. You know, we want to blame a bunch of people or other races for where we are while excusing bad behavior. That's one problem. The other problem is we tend to try to do the right things with the wrong people. And when we do that, it destroys our argument and our credibility because we take a look at these people and we try to defend people who are wrong. Now, I'm not saying we're defending these cops, but I will say this. We're not as vocal about what they did as we would be if they had been white. And there is no difference. And I'm going to tell you why people are saying that this incident was the root cause of it was white supremacy. Because the fact of the matter is, it's true. The cause of what happened to Tyre Nichols is white supremacy. Now, even though it was perpetrated by these coon cops, it's still the result of white supremacy. You hear a lot of conversation around police reform. And I'm going to tell you something. Police reform is not going to work. It's not going to work. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the step, and I'll tell you this too. I'm not going to give it to you, but I'll tell you this too. I have a solution to solve this. But to implement my solution would cause so much strife. It makes me wonder sometimes would it actually be worth, bringing it up. I might later. But I do. But back to what I was saying. You have to understand something about law enforcement agencies. Every law enforcement agency has a system or a way of doing things. And what comes out of that system is let's just say what comes out of a police department system is that individual police department's culture. Now, if the system is bad, the culture is going to be bad. And that's what you're seeing. And a bad culture allows bad things to happen. Now, your Uncle Greg was on TV twice so far in regards to this. And one of the things I said, in regards to this tragic event, being interviewed by different news stations, entities, and one of the things I said was, this wasn't the first time these guys had done this. This was the first time they got caught. And D.L. Hughley brought up an excellent point in the fact that some of these cops are very young. How did they get in this supposedly elite unit with such a short time in the department? And his answer is simple. Because the white people that put them there knew that they were the type of cops, coon cops, that would beat their own people, abuse their own people. So that means, hey, they're some of the good ones. They're in that culture. They've adapted to our culture. They agree with it. They participate in it. They don't try to put a stop on it. Now, relating that, thinking back to my own experience, I had a conversation with my father about his experience because I said, Dad, you had to know. In the time he was in the Detroit Police Department during the 50s and the 60s. So you want to talk about racism. I said, but you had to know some coon cops when you were in the department. And he said, oh yeah, but the difference between his generation, my generation, and this generation is that the fact, because I experienced the same thing in my department, we called out coon cops. We made it very uncomfortable for them. But this generation is different. And the cops that you saw are just a reflection of the current black culture. A culture that has no respect, no remembrance, or no concern about the struggles in our history. And as a result, they'll go out there and abuse a black person just like what racist white cops do. And I saw all this coming. And while we're on this, let me go back in history and tell you about my own experience. We'll give you one example. And I was on the Aurora Police Department. And I'll name the cop who did it. His name is Marcus Dudley. And I'm going to tell you this because the reason I name him, I want to show you what happens. I had a real good friend of mine she was leaving the gym one day, and she ran. It was some minor traffic violation, and Marcus Dudley stopped her and pulled her over. I knew him. I mean, every interaction I had before, with him before, had been, I guess, positive. It hadn't been a negative experience. But anyway, he pulled her over. He knew me very well. And she had left her driver's license at home. And he said, "You don't have your driver's license? Well, I'm taking you to jail." Just that quick. And she asked him, "Well, could I at least call somebody?" She said, "I'm good friends with Officer Dupree. Could I call him to go pick up my 2 kids from school?" And he says, "No, he can't help you." And he took her to jail, towed her car, and took her down to the jail. Okay. When she got to the jail, she was, still talking to him about, because she called somebody, she knew me. And listen to what I'm saying. The white cops in the jail heard her mention my name. And because of my reputation in that department, the sergeant in the jail called me and told me what was going on. And he said, "Greg," he said, "on your word, we'll release her, And I said, "I appreciate that and thank you." And they did. Despite the coon Marcus Dudley and what he did. Okay. Now, I read him the riot act, and I told him this frat, because yes, he was a Greek, supposed to be community oriented, serving the black community, just like these guys in Memphis. And you know what this guy is now? He's a chief of police in Abilene, Texas. So being a coon pays off. Remember, I told you guys a long time ago, there are very, very, very few black police chiefs that I've seen and known that I actually have respect for. And the reason being is that most of them, not all, but most of them try to protect bad systems. All you got to do is look right here in Dallas. When Botham Jean was killed, we had a police chief, and she did more to help to try to cover it up and protect Amber Geiger, the officer that shot him or murdered him, than she did to try to seek justice for the family. But, and the thing is, she's not the only one like that, just like Marcus Dudley isn't the only one like that. So it's just, that's the way it is. D.L. Hughley said about the cops in Memphis that they were blue before they were black in that incident. And that's generally the case. You have a lot of these guys who see, I'm not going to say a lot, and I'm not going to say that, but you have black police officers who see themselves as being blue before being black. Guess what? Their uniform comes off. Your skin color doesn't. And sometimes that uniform comes off because they snatch it off of you. That goes for the ones that try to protect the system. That same system will turn on you, just like it turns on the black community. Now, back to my original point or statement that we're all responsible. And when I say all, I'm not just talking about the black community. No, I'm talking about everybody's community, the white ones too. Because the white community allows bad systems within police departments or law enforcement agencies to exist for whatever reason they do. They don't speak out and try to seek, in the majority of them, they don't try to seek justice for us. They see this stuff going on and it's like, oh, well, some of them are glad it's happening. And let me say this about these guys, these Memphis officers, when they go to trial, these black officers. This is going to be one of the few times in the history of the criminal justice system, in our history, that you're going to see black cops begging to have an all-white jury. Remember, I said that. they're going to fight to get if they can't get an all-white jury, they're going to fight to get as many white people on that jury as possible, because all it takes is one to say, hey, I'm not going to convict a cop. Now, previously I had said we spend too much time and effort trying to do the right thing with wrong people, or do good things with bad people. And I'm going to give you 3 examples how we, and I say we, the black community for the most part. I didn't in any of these 3 incidents I'm going to give, or 3 examples I'm going to give you. I didn't. I saw it coming. And the truth of the matter is, you should have too. Okay. But 3 times we defended people who weren't worth defending. The first being OJ. OJ was somebody who had distanced himself from the community, and for whatever reason, he did like everybody else, all these other coons do. When they get in trouble, they come running back to us. Hey, they trying to go after me. They're trying to persecute me, all because I'm black. And we rallied around them, And the thing is, I know what had happened with Rodney King previously, and the outcome of that trial probably played a role, and a significant role. But the fact of the matter is, OJ was not somebody worth defending. The victory with OJ gained us nothing as a people. It gained OJ. And to be perfectly honest, he wasn't grateful that we did. He used us just like coons do. The second is R. Kelly. It never should have taken as long as it's taken to prosecute R. Kelly for what he did. Everybody knows he was doing it, but because we like R. Kelly, we rallied behind him. Now, I knew R. Kelly was doing what he was doing years before it came out, because he called himself, and you got to pay attention to people. They give themselves, you listen to people long enough, they'll tell you who they are. R. Kelly called himself the Pied Piper, or the Pied Piper of love. And if you know anything about fairy tales, you know what the Pied Piper did. The Pied Piper was hired by a community because his pipe was so hypnotizing when he played it, he could get anybody to follow him. So this town hired the Pied Piper. They had rats in the town, overrun with rats. They hired him to get rid of all the rats. So he played his magical flute and got all the rats to leave and leave the town. Well, guess what? The townspeople refused to pay him. So for revenge, the Pied Piper played his magical flute and led all the kids, all the children in the village away, and they were never seen again. Think about that. And the third person is someone who has just recently made his way back into the news after being freed by Donald Trump. And that's the former mayor of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick, who is now, quote unquote, a preacher. This man was doing so much wrong in the city of Detroit, and everybody knew it. But hey, because we like Kwame, we gonna support him to the end. Well, you live out on the edge for too long, you stay out there for too long, eventually gonna fall off, and that's exactly what happened to him. And I remember when I first saw him speaking at a black summit, Tavis Smiley and Tom Joyner used to have the Black Summit every year on TV, and I watched him right after he got elected, and I listened to him talk, and I just said to myself, this guy's nothing more than a thug in a suit. And I guess that bore itself out. But I say all that to say, when we support people like that, especially in their wrongdoing, we all pay a price for it. The people in the city of Detroit are paying for it. The people in the city of Chicago are paying for it. And the people in LA are paying for it one way or another. So we need to think about that and reevaluate. And I'm going to say this, as far as police reform goes, it's not the police that need reforming. It's the community. Our community needs reforming. What do I mean by that? We have to start holding the people who are doing damage to our community accountable. I don't care if they're from outside the community or within the community. Because if y'all ain't been paying attention, the village is on fire. We always want to go back to that old African saying, it takes a village. Well, guess what? The village is on fire, and it's been on fire for a long time. And some of the people that started the fire came from right within the village, just like these Memphis cops. And if we don't start holding people accountable, there won't be a village anymore. And one of the things that we have to do is continue to fight to have our history known. We shouldn't have to wait for schools or fight for schools to teach our history. We should be teaching our own children our history, because that's the only way that they're going to get the truth if it comes from us. Because think about it. You trust every teacher, even though they have a Black history curriculum. You trust every teacher that's charged with teaching that curriculum to do a good job or to tell the whole truth? Of course not. If that was the case, we wouldn't have all these CRT arguments going on right now. So that's the first step. The next step is we need to do a better job of protecting our own communities and not being afraid of the people within who are preying on our communities. We've allowed gangster hip hop, I've said this before, gangster hip hop culture to become Black culture. And as a result, this hip hop culture influences everything, every aspect of Black life. Not only does it influence every aspect of Black life, and you might not think it does, the way you look at it, well, I'm not like, yeah, it doesn't matter. You're not like that. It's influencing our culture. It's having an impact on everything. When you got folks sitting up concerned about Beyonce and Jay-Z and what they're doing, or other entertainers, more so than what their kids are doing in school, or how many kids are being killed every week and every weekend. You cannot go to a mass event of Black people without worrying about getting shot, especially our kids. I'm sick and tired of looking at the news and seeing about some young Black girl or young Black boy who's been gunned down that had a promising future ahead of them, whether they were the intended target or not. We've grown to accept that. And it's all outgrowth of this negative impact that the gangster hip hop culture has on our race. There is not one place left in our community that is sacred and shielded from this violence. I don't care if it's a school. I don't care if it's a church. I don't care if it's a funeral home. The people that go out and commit these crimes, they don't care. They go right after the person they're looking for. They don't care if it's 300 people standing around the person they're trying to reach or 4. They're going to shoot with the intent of killing that person that they're angry or they got beef with. And they don't care how much collateral damage they do. Well, we should. My nephew has said this, and several others as well, and I'm a strong believer in this saying. Before Black lives can start mattering to anyone else, they have to matter to us first. And as I said previously, they don't. If they did, we'd be more outraged about what's going on within our own community, especially when it's costing us so many innocent lives. Until we change that fact and start caring about our own, we're going to continue to fall victim to these predators. When we do, we won't end up with thugs on the street, and we won't end up with thugs in uniform either, like the cops in Memphis. Now, I previously mentioned Dr. Terry Anderson down in Houston and D.L. Hughley. The things they have said, things I agree with. I'm going to put the link for both of Dr. Anderson's sermon and D.L. Hughley's appearance. D.L. Hughley I'm going to put the link to his appearance. He was on them, the Breakfast Club morning show, whatever. It was a radio show with Charlamagne the God. He talked about these things. I'm going to put the links for both of those so you can check them out yourselves. And I implore you to do so. I really do. I implore you to do so. But the last thing I want to talk about is, I got a question for you. What happened to the Harriet Tubman? I guess it was a $5 bill she was supposed to be on. What happened to that? And the reason I bring this up is because I was looking at my phone earlier today and I get a news alert that Celia Cruz, a Cuban-born salsa, the queen of salsa, black Latino, is going to be on an American quarter. Don't ask me why. I mean, it's not, we're putting foreign people on our money now. Okay. But she is going to be on the quarter. They're doing a series of great women on quarters on our money. I don't have a problem with that. They do have one black lady on there, and her name is Paulie Murray, who was the first first black female priest in the Episcopalian Church. Now, I had heard of her previously, but I want to know, why did Harriet Tubman disappear? And there's been no further conversation about getting that $5 bill printed up. I took offense, and I gotta say, when I saw the thing about Celia Cruz, did I get angry? Yes, I did. And I also got angry when they named the women in this group. I think it's 4 or 5 of them. There's a woman from Hawaii, female doctor. There was an abolitionist and Native American. I'm not taking away from their accomplishments, but I'm a firm believer that people should get in line, and the line forms behind us, because no race of people has done as much in contributing to the history of this country. We got Black History Month. Black History, we should have never had to have a Black History Month if we had made Black history a part of American history, which it is. Black history is American history, more so than most of American history, because our history is a history they always try to cover up. But I digress. As I said, I think that Harriet Tubman's bill should have been pushed through. That should be in print right now. I believe there are more deserving people that could have gone on the quarter, particularly black people. I'm not taking away from the female minister, but I saw what they did. They killed 2 birds with one stone with her, because she's a lesbian, or she was a lesbian, and she's black. So, whoa, they like to play those tricks. So we can kill 2 birds with one stone. But it should be people that when they mention their names, you shouldn't go, who? And that's what I did when I read out of the 5 names. I was familiar with Celia Cruz. I know who she is. And the minister, I had heard of her before. I've actually heard her speak before, but I was vaguely familiar with her. She wasn't someone, when I think about the civil rights, and don't get me wrong, she played a major role in civil rights as well. Thurgood Marshall called her book The Bible on the Civil Rights Movement. So she did make an impact, but there were other people before. And I want to know why all of a sudden we pick less known people to go on our currency, and why we're picking somebody who wasn't even born here. So needless to say, I was a little upset about that. I mean, who's next? Zoe Saldana? Okay, enough on that. Finally, I want to close out. I'm recording this a few days before the Super Bowl, and everyone's celebrating the fact that we got 2 brothers playing in the Super Bowl. The Kelsey brothers, one on Kansas City and one, yeah, I know. You have one black man and a biracial man playing, and they classify that as two blacks playing in the Super Bowl. Now, needless to say, I won't be rooting for Patrick Mahomes. I'll never root for anything that Patrick Mahomes does for a number of reasons. First being, his mother was one of these psychotic Trump supporters, the MAGA people. His wife, I don't know if his wife is girlfriend, she loves the media attention, so she's always doing crazy things. But, I can look past all of that. But one thing I can't excuse is when all the things were going on around George Floyd, Patrick Mahomes had made some statements about black people, like he wasn't black. If you guys, tells you where his mindset is. He had made one of the statements he made where if you just did what the police told you to do, you wouldn't get killed. To show you how ignorant he is. I don't know if he's educated himself to this point, but how ignorant he is around what happens with black people and these deadly encounters with the police. So I don't want him to win. I got to say this. I think he's a better quarterback. I'm not going to deny his talent, but he's not somebody I support or ever support. That's why I don't buy State Farm insurance. Anyway, so I'm hoping for Jalen Hurts and pulling for the Philadelphia Eagles because I believe in holding people accountable. And even if my way of holding them accountable is insignificant, at least I know within myself I've done something. I wish more people felt the same. So, until the next episode, this is your Uncle Greg saying, be safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Uncle Greg Show podcast. Be sure that you like, share, and subscribe this podcast on all social media platforms. And if you have any comments, feel free to email. The links and details for all social media platforms and email address for the Uncle Greg Show podcast are contained in the details section of each podcast. Thank you for listening and be safe.